Health and fitness requires more than just the physical work. It starts with the work you put in to grow your mind. Welcome to the Mind Gains podcast, where we discuss what it takes mentally to see results physically. I'm your host, Jess. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Mind Gains podcast. I just want to start off by thanking all of you who are listening and for just being so supportive of me and this show. I really was surprised at the amount of people that reached out with just the kindest words surrounding this. And honestly, I needed it because sometimes I feel like me speaking into this microphone and talking about the things that I love talking about. Sometimes I feel like, do people really need this? Do they need this information? Am I providing anything of value to others? And I know logically that those are my own fears coming into play in my own mind, trying to tell myself not to do the uncomfortable thing because it's uncomfortable. And I am learning every day to just fight back against that voice in my head when it says these things, and having the support that you guys have provided to me has been really, really meaningful to me. So I just wanted to start off by thanking you all. Today's episode is going to get a little bit more on the scientific side of things. Personally, I love the science behind all of this stuff. I am such a nerd when it comes to this and how your body works and what the science is behind fat loss, muscle building, reverse dieting, all that good stuff. So I want to get into some of that on a very basic level. I'll try not to get too over the top with it, but I also want to be able to get the practical, here's what you need to do to see results information out to you so that you can start making forward progress here. So, for today, I want to talk about what a calorie deficit is. And if you have been at least semi involved in the fitness community, you've probably heard this term, but maybe you're not really sure what the heck it is. Well, you are about to learn because I'm here to discuss all things calorie deficit. And the reason I want to talk about this is because for years, I would go through these phases of taking a crack at getting into shape and building muscle and losing fat. And my efforts were so misguided because I had no idea what the heck I was doing. And then I'd get frustrated because I didn't see results and I couldn't stick with any of it long enough to even give it a chance to work, and I would quit. And looking back now, I'm like, well, yeah, no duh. I didn't see any results because I was just throwing, what's that saying? Like throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. I don't even know if that's the correct saying. I probably really butchered that. But essentially, I was just hopping from thing to thing, trying this and trying that, and hoping that any piece of it might work. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't progressing at all. But it's because I didn't know how to apply my efforts and in what direction to do so. So I think it's really important if you are just starting your health and fitness journey that you take a little bit of time to learn what is required to see results so that you can actually know for a fact that you're working in the right direction and not just spinning your wheels for days and weeks and months on end going nowhere. And I actually Googled a few days ago, how many calories should I eat to lose fat? Because I wanted to see what would come up. And honestly, I was a little shocked at some of the answers. One of the articles I read that stuck out to me said that in general, a female should limit their caloric intake to 1,500 or less in order to lose 1 pound per week. Okay, yes, for some women, their caloric intake would need to be at around 1,500 to lose 1 pound a week, I'm sure. But for others, it could be 1,800 to lose 1 pound a week. For others, it could be 2,000 to lose 1 pound a week. Do we see what a large range there is there? You cannot generalize caloric intake because it's not general at all. It's extremely specific to you, to your body composition, to your energy expenditure, to your genetics. And this is why I want to go over how to find out what your specific calorie deficit should be, because truthfully, Google isn't doing you any favors here. So let's just get into what a calorie deficit is and how to find yours. To preface a calorie deficit, I think it's important to point out and acknowledge that every single one of us has what is called maintenance calories. And basically, this is just the amount of calories that you need to consume every day in order to stay exactly where you're at, essentially. Like, not lose fat, not build muscle, not lose or gain any weight. You are simply just maintaining your body weight at maintenance. So, a calorie deficit then is simply when you are burning more calories than you consume on a daily or weekly basis. And it's what's going to get you your fat loss results. And the reason behind this is because your body is constantly burning calories for energy, right? Like at all times when you're eating, when you're sleeping, when you're at rest, when you're taking a walk outside, it needs to burn calories to keep you alive and moving. So when you purposefully and strategically give yourself less calories than you technically need to survive, your body says, all right, we're pulling from fat stores because we don't have any more calories coming in right now, and we got to keep things moving here. So let's start using what we've previously stored to meet our current energy demands, because that's what fat is. It's provided from excess calories that you have eaten and has been stored away in the body in case you need it at some point in the future. I mean, think about this. Your body will do whatever it needs to protect you at all costs. Its sole function is survival, and it has no idea if at some point down the line calories are going to be restricted or you're going to be in a life or death situation, God forbid, where you don't have access to food and you're starving. So it plans ahead and it stores those extra calories as fat to utilize later on if the situation arises. And if you've been trying to lose fat and you just can't seem to, most likely 9 times out of 10, it's because you are not in a calorie deficit. You haven't provided that situation to your body, and it doesn't ever have to pull from fat stores because it always has enough calories and enough energy coming in. So, in a much less dramatic sense, this is what's happening when you're in a calorie deficit, trying to lose some fat because you want to be leaner. Your body starts burning away at those fat stores for energy to keep you going. Now, the big question is, what is my maintenance and how do I know if I'm in a calorie deficit? And this is where it gets a little tricky because there is no way I can just look at you or look at your eating habits and know what your maintenance calories are, because everyone's maintenance is completely different. And it makes me smile because I've had people ask me to look at their macros and their calorie intake without having any prior knowledge to what they were previously eating and ask me if the amount of calories they have their goal set to is a good maintenance for them. And I really, truly wish I could just know the answer to that question in that situation, but I can't. Unless we have spent a little bit of time finding out what your maintenance is, I have no idea how many calories a day your body specifically is expending. And that's why there is no one size fits all approach to nutrition either, because my maintenance calories are going to be completely different from your maintenance calories, which are going to be completely different from your mom's, your sisters, your brothers, your cousins. Everyone has a different maintenance because we all have different body compositions and genetics and background and dietary habits and different levels of energy expenditure, which is why you can't just see that the fitness influencer you look up to says they're eating 1700 calories a day and think that that means that you should start eating 1700 calories a day because that's what they do and they look great. No, your energy needs are different than theirs, most likely. So you need to find out what yours is. It is specific to you. And the way that you find out what your maintenance calories are so that you can put yourself into a calorie deficit is, drum roll please, tracking your food. I know no one wants to hear this. I know tracking food and tracking macros can be scary and overwhelming and a pain at first, but wouldn't you rather take a little bit of time to get over that initial hump of learning how to track so that you can know how to put yourself into a calorie deficit and know that you are making progress towards your goals every single day rather than not track your food, not know whether you're in a deficit or not, and spend years not making an ounce of progress? Guys, to me, that situation is way more frustrating and annoying than just tracking my food is. And know that when it comes to tracking, I mean, really, like anything in health and fitness, yes, it's an adjustment at first because you've never done it, but you learn it, you practice it, and you get better at it with time to where it's not a hassle anymore. And it's just a part of your daily routine. And you don't even have to think twice about tracking. Like, I literally mention this to my husband, Massimo, all the time that I forget that most people don't track their food. That's how ingrained it is into my life and my daily routine that I don't even notice that I'm doing something that most people will never even try. It gets easier with time. So, my suggestion here in regards to finding out what your calorie deficit looks like is going to be downloading a food tracking app, track your food for about a week, and then take the average of those days to see about how many calories a day you are currently eating. I have personally used both my Pal and Macros First, and honestly, I love them both. I really like my Pal, but unfortunately, if you want to use their scanner, you have to pay for it. I think when I got it, it was like $80 or something like that for the entire year, which isn't bad, but I'm not sure if they've, maybe raised their prices. The free version of Macros First does have pretty much everything you would ever need to track your food. Their scanner is free, which, regardless of whatever app you use to track, I really highly recommend getting the version that you can just scan the barcode of the foods you're eating. Otherwise, you will have to actually go into their database and manually search for every single food you're eating. It's just way more time consuming and annoying to do it that way, in my opinion. When I first started tracking my food, I started with my Pal, and when I saw that that's what I was going to have to do every single time I ate, I just went ahead and bought the paid version for the scanner because I just knew that doing it the other way would lead to a lot more resistance for me with food tracking, and I didn't need to sit there and frustrate myself even more over that. So, my recommendation, get an app with a scanner and thank me later. So, something you don't want to do when you start tracking is change the way that you were already eating. This 7-day time period where you're trying to find out, about how much you're currently eating on average to get a good idea of a starting point for yourself. If you start changing your eating habits that week, then guess what you're not going to be able to do? Find out how much you are currently eating. I find that so many people do this, and it makes sense, right? I mean, if you're starting to track your food, you're being made aware of your decisions around food and your eating habits. And most of the time, when we're made aware, we naturally start to make better eating decisions. So it's normal to want to do this, but it's going to be really important to find out what you were eating leading up to this point. If you start making some better decisions around what you're putting into your body, you're probably going to be eating a little bit less because you're not grabbing extra handfuls of this and that, or snacking constantly, or maybe you're now eating some less calorically dense foods because you're more aware of what you're eating. And in doing this, now you've unintentionally put yourself into a deficit, and now we really don't know what your true maintenance is. So, again, I just wouldn't change eating habits for this short period of time, again, about a week. Just simply track what you are already eating. All right, so now it's been about a week or so, you've done your tracking, and you find that you are averaging about 2,200 calories a day. You know that in order to lose some fat, you have to go into a deficit. I'm going to give you a little test. I want you to guess what you should do next in this situation. Option one, cut your calories in half to 1,100 a day to lose weight as quickly as possible. Or option two, go into a slight deficit by bringing calories down to about 1900 or 2000 a day? Your answer should be option two. Let me explain. What often happens when people try to lose fat is they put themselves into too much of a deficit. They try to take a shortcut to fat loss because we all know it takes a lot of time to lose some body fat, and they think, I don't have time for that. I don't have the patience for that. I'm going to cut my daily caloric intake in half and start getting to the gym every day of the week. This is not what you should be doing. This is going all in, like I spoke about last week. This is doing too much to get results quick. And will it work? Yeah, probably for a time because you're starving yourself. I mean, if you just decide to not give your body the food it needs, yeah, you'll drop weight real quick on that scale. But in doing so, you're destroying your metabolism, you're ignoring what your body needs from you, and you're not working towards results that you're gonna be able to keep. Because guess what, guys? You give your body half the calories it's used to having, it's gonna be really unhappy with you. Things aren't going to function correctly. You're probably not going to be able to stick with this for longer than a few weeks at a time at most. And then what? The second you start adding those calories back in because you can't sustain an 1100 calorie deficit for the rest of your life, you gain all that weight back plus more usually. Going about your calorie deficit this way gets you nowhere fast. And notice how I said weight loss and not fat loss, because when you do it this way, you're probably going to be losing weight, not fat. And yes, those are two different things. Losing weight is simply seeing the number on the scale go down. Now, what is that weight made up of, you might ask? Could be some fat, depending on how you go about your deficit, but more likely than not, if you cut your calories too much, that weight you're seeing come down on the scale is coming from your muscle. You do not want this. You want fat loss, not weight loss. You don't want to be losing muscle. Muscle is what gives you that nice, defined look. It's what gives shape to your body, and it has so many benefits to your body and to your longevity. You want the scale to be lowering because you're losing actual fat, not muscle. If you're losing weight, but it is coming from your muscle mass, you're going to be left with that skinny fat look. You'll just be left a little bit of a smaller version than what you are now, but you won't be defined or lean looking. You'll still look, as we like to say, fluffy. And the way you go about actual fat loss and not just weight loss is through a moderate calorie deficit sustained over a long period of time while eating an adequate amount of protein every day. And yes, the amount of protein you should be eating on a daily basis is probably much higher than what you're already getting and what you think you should be eating if you're not tracking your food. But truthfully, that is getting into a whole other topic. That is for another day, another episode. Getting back on topic, do not slash your calories in half. Your body will not know how to handle a 2200 calorie intake on a Monday and then an 1100 calorie intake on Tuesday, the following day. Trying to lose fat this way will not work long term, so please don't try it. All you need to do is find out what your intake currently is and then pull back from that a little bit. Anywhere from 200 to 500 calories is pretty sufficient, and then maintain that over an extended period of time. It will take longer doing it this way. It might be frustrating that you're not losing pounds on the scale at the rapid speed of light, but if you want to keep the results you worked so hard for, you have to be patient. There are no shortcuts when it comes to fitness. There are no workarounds. This is not a get rich quick situation. And anything in health and fitness, any product, any program that markets itself as such, should be ran from. It is a scam. It takes time, it takes patience, but nothing worth having comes easy or overnight. If it does, you better start really soaking up whatever results you were able to obtain. Take lots of pictures because within, I'll be generous here, a few months, I would honestly bet even sooner, everything you worked for will be gone. And to me, there's nothing more frustrating than that. I want to circle back really quickly to the 200 to 500 range I was talking about because you might be wondering where the heck I got these numbers from. I promise I didn't just make them up. They are backed by science. So, the reason for these numbers is because 1 pound of body fat is equal to about 3,500 calories. So, if you were to decrease your calories by 500 a day, let's just say, you're currently eating 2,000 calories a day just for an even number, and you bring that down to 1,500 calories a day, you would be able to lose about 1 pound a week because 3,500 calories divided by 7 days a week comes out to 500 calories a day, taken away from whatever your maintenance calories are. So, if a 500 calorie deficit is too much for you, you don't want to take away that many calories, doing a 250 calorie deficit, so in our example, eating 1,750 calories a day instead of 2,000 a day, will yield you about half a pound of fat loss a week. And this just comes down to what you personally want to do, what works best for you. Really, anywhere within this range is fine for a calorie deficit. I wouldn't recommend doing anything much higher than 500 just because, again, you have to think about, how long you're going to be able to stick to this long term and how good it is for your health. I've found that for me personally, my max is at right around 200 calories, maybe 250 for a deficit. I remember when I first started, I found out that, at the time I was averaging about 2,000 calories a day for my intake. So I started off nice and slow with my deficit, brought that down by 200 calories, and that was pretty much my cap. I was really not feeling like I could go much lower than that, if at all, without being overly hungry because I'm a hungry girl. I have quite a big appetite. I love food. I love to eat. And going below that 1,800 calorie threshold at the time was just not something I thought I could sustain for the long term. So I kept my deficit on the lower side of that range. And it was slow and steady, but hey, I achieved my fat loss goal and I've been able to keep all of it off ever since. I also wanted to talk about what you should expect when you are in a calorie deficit because I think a lot of the time we go into this kind of blind and not really knowing what we can expect out of it. So, when you are in a calorie deficit, you can expect to be a little hungry, not starving, not feeling weak, not going crazy because you're just so dang hungry and you don't know how much longer you can keep this up. If that is how you are feeling, you are in too much of a deficit and you need to add some calories back in. Yes, you should expect a little bit of hunger because going back to what I said before, you're purposefully giving your body a little less than what it needs so that it has no other choice but to pull from fat stores to burn in order to meet the energy demands that are being placed on it. But you should not be starving yourself. You need to find the level of deficit between 200 to 500 calories that you can sustain over a longer period of time. You can also expect to have to make some extra sacrifices during this time. Things like not eating out as often, not being as lenient on your food choices, or saying no to the third Crave cookie of the week. If you guys don't know, Crave is a cookie place that makes the best cookies I think I have ever had in my life, and I am just obsessed with them now. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm sure you have seen me post about having a cookie every now and again. But during a deficit, during a fat loss phase, we can't be eating 3 of them a week. For anyone that doesn't know, there are different phases of your fitness journey that you can go through. So you have bulking, cutting, maintenance, body recomposition, reverse diet, and different phases require different things of you. And being that when you're in a building phase, aka bulking phase, usually there is a little bit more leeway here because you have extra calories and you don't have to be quite as strict within the parameters of your calorie intake. But when you're in a cut or a deficit to lose some excess body fat, you obviously don't have as many calories to work with, which sometimes means you have to make more sacrifices. But this is temporary. I think a lot of people look at a fat loss phase and think that they just have to restrict themselves to see progress and then they have to maintain that for the rest of their lives. Like, no. Will you have to sacrifice a few more things in a deficit? Yes, absolutely. But you do that for a little while, you accomplish the fat loss goal you're after, and then we can start slowly working calorie intake back up so that we have a little more wiggle room for our food choices and our lifestyle choices moving forward. And following up on that, you don't want to restrict yourself. I know that might sound kind of contradictory to what I just said about making sacrifices, but there is a difference between saying no to going out for dessert with your significant other every other night and never going out for the dessert. You do still want to include the things you enjoy, the foods you love in your diet in moderation. Moderation is the name of the game with all of this. Because if you completely take out everything you're used to having and all the foods you love, again, how long are you going to be able to adhere to that? Probably not very long at all. I know I couldn't, but I have some great news. You don't need to. It's absolutely not necessary. So include what you love even during this time of a lower calorie intake, and you will be able to sustain it a lot longer. That is it, guys. That is all I have to say on calorie deficits. I definitely want to do future episodes getting more into the cutting phase specifically because in my opinion, a longer term fat loss phase is different than a cutting phase. And this episode was definitely more geared towards the lifestyle, longer term, larger fat loss goal than it was toward an actual cutting phase. But I hope this helps. I tried to dive, really deep into not only what is required to achieve fat loss, but the why behind it and how to do it as well. If you have any questions on any of this, please reach out to me on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please be sure to share it with someone you know that might also find it valuable.